The Final Fantasy XIV community is the nicest, kindest, and most reasonable community in MMOs right now. The Final Fantasy XIV community is filled with fake, passive-aggressive, evangelizing, sanctimonious people who are more toxic than those they try to gatekeep. These are both statements you probably heard before, or at least similar. So which one of these is true? Is the former just FF players desperately trying to cultivate a better image of their game than what it actually is, and that it's not, in fact, filled with furries everywhere? Or is the latter just bitter WoW players desperately trying to cope with the fact that they've been cucked into oblivion this past couple of years by a man who's literally making their biggest rival and the future game of the year at the same time, and trying to convince everyone that the community sucks in order to try and get people into their game that's most definitely not also filled with furries? As the well-studied and very special boy I know you are, viewer, surely you're smart enough to understand it's basically neither, as these are both overgeneralizations of a large group of people, and that's how these things usually go. That said, you're wrong. In this particular case, it's both. Both are true, both are wrong, in their own way, and I'll explain why. Actually, I'll do you one better. I'll give you the reasons as to why both of these stereotypes exist at the same time and where they even come from. As someone with 3,000 hours of FF, I may not be the most seasoned, badass ultimate raiders, but I've more than had my time to get my lay of the land and get a grasp in this community. Whether it's roleplay, raiding, or casual content, I believe I have an answer to the question. No matter what, I'll do my best to give an unbiased and level-headed take on why the community has such a twin-sided image without acting like a fanboy or a rabid hater. That said, I'm sure I'm still gonna get death threats from this video, so bring it on. Let's start with the bad. The thing about this topic is, before we understand how the FF community behave, I think it's best we understand why, and for that we need to talk about the game itself first. I really want to address some of the critiques of the FF community individually, because it can't be responsible for having done one thing without being a literal monster in human flesh guilty of all charges. So let's get started. The Final Fantasy community is fake and only nice to you if you like their MMO. They evangelize their game when it's not as good as they say it is. This is maybe the biggest one, and why I want to talk about it first. After the great migration of players from WoW to Final Fantasy caused by one fictional baldman and one real baldman, tons of people tried out this game. And what we essentially had is a wave of people who have no idea what to expect other than, it's really good, trust me bro. Like it or not, we all have preconceived notions of what an MMO is and what an MMO should be. So whenever we start playing anything new, we immediately start comparing it to our previous tastes and experiences. Normally that can either make you excited by the freshness of it all, or cause a new game to leave a horribly bad taste in your mouth. But in Final Fantasy's case, that second issue is an absolute steroids. For all its good graces, Final Fantasy XIV is not a fun game to start playing. From a purchase system more complicated than the average Path of Exile build, to a very poor start, lack on in-game freedom, graphics, and gameplay. This game is absolutely shit for a new player. Like, think about what are the good things a new player has heard about this game, and how they contrast with what they'll actually experience with their first hours here. The game has complex and interesting classes, means nothing, because what they experience is all the joy and depth of a fucking level 17 Lancer. The game has really interesting gameplay. It's an absolute joke to them, because they're facing the unresponsiveness of the combat system without any of the good shit that comes later on. And even if it eventually feels really good to play in this game, that's not something a new player will experience until fucking Stormblood. Oh, and if they play in a third world country like me, that isn't next to any servers, Yeah, have fun with your permanent 200 ping, fucker. You might as well contort yourself into shape, because you and clipping are gonna be one and the same from now on. The game's story is great, doesn't really work either, since the only thing that we'll experience is a non-voice acted Realm Reborn, and yeah, that shit picks whenever they kick the lattice into the wall.
Oh no, man.
The game is really social and chill, is something they can experience, but if and only if they go out of their way to hang out with people, such as actively spending time in the Gold Saucer, RP groups, or just overall talking to the nice people in Lenza. Which is in of itself not really all that fulfilling, since they're restricted by the MSQ on what they can and can't do with others, meaning you'll be constantly feeling trapped, and like you need to catch up on hundreds of hours of stories and quests in order to be fully able to enjoy this game with your friends. And when you're on the clock to play the gameplay, story, and quality of life of a Realm Reborn, a time in the game where the team was still getting their shit together after the sodomy that was 1.0, then you might understand why the average new player might have about as much fun with 14 as Josh Strife Hayes had when he had to review Isekai Demon Waifu. Final Fantasy XIV is a great game, but it takes its sweet time getting good. People that start playing have been promised the best MMO in the market right now, but when they actually start playing, they're met with the average single player story with a relatively dull gameplay, railroading MSQ that is so much more pivotal than anything else for their progress, they have no incentive whatsoever to actually just do whatever the hell they want. There's no freedom to your first playthrough of 14. You do the MSQ, your class quests, maybe distract yourself with some Gold Saucer, and that's about it. For all the flaws in Classic WoW, when I was playing it, I felt like the world was in my hands. I could do whatever I want, join in with anyone I want, level through dungeons or try and mess up some horde in my way to questing, while not feeling like I was being restricted. Final Fantasy starts completely closed on what you can do, unlike a lot of MMOs, and it takes its sweet time opening up all the options within it. Yeah, any MMO as the first level is gonna be slow, but in other games, you're allowed to do whatever you want in the world during those times. And even though it's mostly a preset route of doing Westfall and then Dead Mines, the fact you feel like you're in control is the main differential here. You never take your hands off the keyboard to watch a cutscene. You never stop the action to read some forced throwaway dialogue. You are in full control of your character at all times. You're simply thrown into a sandbox open world and told to have fun. Now, don't get me wrong, the MSQ is amazing at its peak moments and expansions, and having everything in the game tied to it brings more immersion and purpose to what you do. But the fact you're still forced to play a single player game for hundreds of hours before getting to play an MMO like you've been promised is extremely unappealing to some people. Some people just don't like single player story driven games, or just aren't looking to play one right now. And that's a sentiment that needs to be respected, especially when they sign up to play an MMO. The MSQ is great, don't get me wrong, but only when you want to do it, not when you have to do it. All of this leads to a gigantic wall for new players who are starting out in 14 that gets bigger with every new expansion, where every single major aspect they've been told by the community about the quality of this game feels like bullshit. None of 14's qualities shine within the first 200 hours, which leads to many disillusioned players to other MMOs thinking the community is just absolutely psychotic and dishonest. Some new players might understand the game gets better with time, but a lot of them are absolutely not willing to spend 500 hours to find out if they like it. Which leads us to the situation. Why then does the FF community evangelize their game? Well, imagine yourself into the shoes of a veteran player, convincing a new player to stick with the game. You essentially have what is, and I agree to be, the best MMO in the market right now, and you're genuinely having a blast with it, but you know the first few hours are not nearly as good as what you're playing. So the only things a new player has as a point of reference is his experience with the game, which, as I said, is likely to be bad, and your words, which are not at all reflective of his own sentiments and what he's playing right now. You have to sell this game harder than an NFT bro who spent all of his life savings on an ape JPEG that's quickly losing value. So you talk it up and you talk about all the good shit they'll be doing in the future. They need that encouragement to keep playing, or else they'll just quit as a level 13 archer and go on Twitter to, God forbid, call the game Mid Fantasy XIV.
Bloody hell!
And trust me, I've been there. It's deeply frustrating to know you're playing something great and people just won't give it a chance and take the leap. Feels like you're a hermit that traveled deep into the desert and found an amazing oasis, then going back to your drought-ridden city only for them to say that all they can see is sand and thus it could never be water further in. And just like that, you sound like a madman, promising great things to people who simply see your words as having no connection to their experiences or the reality at the moment. You need people to have faith this game will get better in order for them to actually reach the part that it does. And in order to create faith within people, your words need to be gospel. In that way, I hope you can see that the FF community isn't lying to you. They aren't fake assholes creating a propaganda campaign about their game. It's genuinely every bit as good as they say it is. It just starts out really rough. And it's important to highlight that that's not an excusable problem, since it bleeds new players, make the community look bad, and lies entirely on Square Enix to fix, which is something they should have started doing a long time ago. That said, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, it's important to address the community's own misgivings, as I'm not just trying to make excuses for bad behavior in a biased take. And I gotta say, some of the shit that came out of the FF community lately has been nothing short of embarrassing. Many streamers being called grifters for not doing the MSQ fast enough, or not caring about the story of a video game as much as people hope they would. Part of the reason FF players can be a bit too aggressive in these situations is because the game is designed in a way to make you emotionally invested. In the story, in your character, in your friends, both as in your players and NPCs. Sadly, that can mean that people often become blind to what they're saying, as they have an emotional stake in this, ending up in some people calling for Asmongold to be crucified over taking a large break from the game. When in all honesty, throw the first stone ye who have finished the MSQ in one swift, uninterrupted go. I mean, I took a huge break at the beginning of Heavensward, where I straight up dropped the game for a year because of how fed up I was with being forced to do ARR MSQ. I understand why a lot of people in the community may act this way, I really do. But at a certain point you need to understand that asking someone to spend 300 hours of what little free time they may have in a game is not reasonable. You shouldn't be mad at people who take breaks or drop the game. You should be mad at Squeenix for allowing such a destructive barrier to exist in their game, or just understand that the game isn't for everybody. I get that the issue is a lot harder to fix than some stupid and simplified take like just make the MSQ optional, but they have barely tried to tackle this problem, which is by far the biggest player bleeding wound in the game, and it needs to change somehow. Sadly, all of the above mean that the image of the game is extremely important, as it is often the only thing convincing people to keep playing long after they're fed up with grinding MSQ, thus making the FF community extremely averse to criticism, which further brands them as evangelists. Now, I've given you the reasons behind this, but I gotta say, it doesn't make it right or excusable. Sometimes I feel like if FF players embraced and were more open with the flaws of the game, more players would stick around with it. Singing praises about a game someone's having a very bad time in is not going to make them any fonder of you or the game. Alright, now, if you're a WoW Andy looking for catharsis and validation, this is where you should click off the video, because you're essentially only going to be cucked from now on. Man, I'm collecting death threats from every community this video. So, despite understandable reasons, the Final Fantasy community is objectively fake, evangelizing, and inquisitive, yeah? No, not really, and I've seen people trying to discredit the good things about this community, just as much as I've seen people try and disregard the bad parts of it, claiming it to be the greatest and kindest. I mean, I've seen some WoW players try to claim that FF community is only nice because they have powered up extra not paid Jennies for GMs, where they rule tyrannically over the land, and anything that isn't a direct compliment or a reference to catgirl porn will be banned. And just like that, people are supposedly forced to be nice, which is, in all honesty, worse than being toxic. If you've ever dealt with a passive-aggressive coworker in real life, you know what I'm talking about. Fucking Samantha. But I'll tell you that not only is the moderation in FF not nearly that bad, since most of these claims come from outplayers who literally aren't used to any moderation level above none at all, but also that the Final Fantasy community is genuinely kind and nice to people, without the threat of being banned or the promise of rewards for being nice. One of the best examples for this is waiting for new players to watch cutscenes when fighting a new boss, which is customary in FF. There's no way a GM can ban you for just starting the fight. Like, there's no way that it can even know that you started the fight before the Sprouts cutscene was over. It's a near perfect litmus test. There's no reward for it, there's no gun to their heads. They do it because people did it to them when they were new, and they enjoyed the game more because of it. Simple as. The game simply cultivates a culture of positivity, which is a lot harder in games like, say, WoW, where the community of the game finds itself divided even in the smallest of things, and thus are constantly filled with bitterness and vitriol as to which direction to take the game, whether to go with the old or to stick with the new. I mean, that happens even on Classic. Final Fantasy wasn't afforded the luxury of success when it started out, so when people saw Square Enix change the game, everyone was on board, united and looking forward for a brighter future, wherever that may be, mostly because it couldn't get any worse. The game is designed in a way as to reduce frustration at every turn, and that generates a genuinely kind, fun, enjoyable community to spend time with. There are some bad apples, always will be, but in my experiences with people in FF, I've been pretty much great through and through. I've had people be super toxic on Duty Roulette exactly 3 times, I shit you not. For all its misgivings, the community isn't lying to you about the quality of the game, nor is it lying about how welcoming they are. I lost track of how many times someone went out of their way to help me with some random bullshit I needed, or someone asked to take a picture of my character to send it back to me as a free gift because they wanted to train how to do G-pose well. Or when someone just complimented me over my glams. I can say without a shadow of a doubt, most people genuinely care. There's something beautiful here. It's an anomaly, really. No other MMOs community has been as good. The closest thing I can remember was during Guild Wars 2 launch at around 2012 and mostly to this day. I genuinely love this community, and I could spend the whole video just talking about fun and enjoyable experiences I've had with everybody. Not because I want to convince you to play the game, you do what you want, but because they're great stories worth telling, and they were great friends worth meeting. I mean, is there really a single person who played this game for a while and doesn't have an impressive screenshot folder filled with good times with other people? When was the last time an MMO got you doing that? Final Fantasy and its community did the impossible to me. It made me fall in love with MMOs once again. I've tried every other MMO under the sun for a sizable amount of time, yet it always missed that spark. But even now that I don't play the game as much as I used to, and I have a job and university to worry about, I'll never forget the memories. I've yet to cancel my sub because it still feels so good to come back to Eorzea and see what kind of shenanigans people are up to this time. It simply feels good to be a part of this game. There's certainly flaws that need to be addressed, and the FF community needs to own up to its own shit more often. But I don't think that invalidates the warmth present every time you boot up this MMO and spend time with its people. Final Fantasy XIV's community may have people that act like evangelists at times, but consider this. People wouldn't evangelize something they didn't genuinely believe in, and people wouldn't believe in something that didn't make them happy. Thank you for watching. Hey guys, I'm Isolet and I hope you liked my first video. I'm a YouTuber and a musician, and in this channel I'll be making videos about varied content, but with a focus on humor and video games. Life has been pretty rough lately, but at the very least now I have time to focus more on YouTube and music, which is what brings me joy. So if you want to see more videos like this, also please leave a like or a sub or follow me on Twitter. As a musician myself, I must say, if you like any of the music I use in this video, please support that artist. I left all the timestamps and names in the description below. I mostly put on music from smaller to medium artists, so I think they might appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a good one.